I worked at Meridian Tech for 3 years as a mid-level project coordinator. The pay was decent, the work was manageable, and I kept my head down. But there was one problem. My manager, Derek Hathaway. Derek was the kind of guy who thrived on control. He micromanaged everything, took credit for other people's work, and had this unsettling need to be the smartest person in every room. But worst of all, he had this habit of belittling people in front of others. And I was his favorite target. It started small. A condescending comment during a team meeting. A dismissive hand wave when I offered an idea. Over time, it escalated. He'd mock my presentations, interrupt me mid-sentence, and once even told a client I was still learning the ropes, even though I'd been there longer than half the senior staff. I tolerated it because I needed the job. My younger sister was in college, my mom had medical bills, and I couldn't afford to make waves. So I smiled, nodded, and swallowed my pride. But Derek didn't stop there. He seemed to get a sick thrill out of pushing me further. He'd assign me tasks at 5 in the evening that were due the next morning. He'd change project requirements without telling me and then berate me in front of the team when I didn't meet his new expectations. He'd CC executives on emails pointing out minor mistakes I made, blowing them completely out of proportion. My coworkers noticed. Some gave me sympathetic looks. Others avoided me entirely, probably scared they'd become his next victim. No one said anything. No one ever did. I remember one particular incident that should have been my breaking point. I'd spent 2 weeks working on a client proposal for a major account. It was solid work. I'd researched competitors, analyzed market trends, created detailed financial projections. I was proud of it. But when I presented it in the meeting, Derek tore it apart. He said it was amateurish, poorly researched, and embarrassing. He made me feel like an incompetent fool in front of the entire team. Then, 3 days later, he presented the exact same proposal to the client, word for word, and took full credit when they signed. When I confronted him privately, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "That's how the game works. Maybe you'll learn that someday." I should have quit right then. But I didn't. I convinced myself it would get better. That if I just worked harder, if I proved myself enough, he'd eventually respect me. I was wrong. Derek didn't want competent employees. He wanted people he could control. People he could crush to make himself feel powerful. The worst part wasn't even the professional sabotage. It was the psychological warfare. Derek had this way of making you doubt yourself. He'd praise you one day, making you think you'd finally earned his approval, and then tear you down the next. He'd set impossible standards, and then act disappointed when you couldn't meet them. He'd gaslight you into thinking your concerns were overreactions, that you were too sensitive, that you just needed thicker skin. Over time, I started believing him. I started thinking maybe I really wasn't good enough. Maybe I really was the problem. Then came the annual office holiday party. It was held at a rented event space downtown, open bar, catered food, live jazz band, the whole deal. The company went all out. Everyone was there. Executives from corporate, department heads, clients, even the CEO flew in from the West Coast. I didn't want to go. I had a feeling Derek would find some way to humiliate me. But skipping the party would have been worse. It would have looked like I couldn't handle the pressure, like I was weak. So I put on a professional dress, forced a smile, and showed up. The first hour was fine. I stayed near the edges of the room, made polite small talk with a few colleagues, and avoided Derek entirely. I watched him work the room, shaking hands with executives, laughing too loud at their jokes, playing the part of the charismatic leader. It made me sick. But then the presentation started. Every year, the company recognized top performers. Employees who brought in major clients, closed big deals, or led successful projects. They'd call people up on stage, hand them plaques, take photos. I wasn't expecting anything. I just wanted to get through the night without incident. But then Derek stepped up to the microphone. He was already a few drinks in, his face flushed, his tie loosened. He started his speech by thanking the team, praising the company's growth, talking about how proud he was of his department. The usual corporate nonsense. People clapped politely. Then he paused, and his expression changed. He got this look in his eyes, this predatory gleam. And he said something that made my stomach drop. You know, not everyone here pulls their weight. Some people just coast along, doing the bare minimum, hoping no one notices. And tonight, I think it's important we talk about accountability. Because that's what separates the winners from the losers in this business. The room went silent. People shifted uncomfortably. I felt every pair of eyes in the room turn toward me. My heart pounded in my chest. Derek looked directly at me, his smile widening into something cruel. Take my project coordinator, for example. She's been with us for 3 years, and yet somehow, she still can't manage a simple timeline. Just last week, she turned in a report 2 days late. 2 days. And when I asked her why, do you know what she said? She said she didn't understand the instructions. Instructions that a high schooler could have followed. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Not loud, but enough. Enough to make my face burn with humiliation. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. My throat closed up. My hands trembled. Derek continued, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. Now, I'm not trying to embarrass anyone. I'm just saying, maybe some people aren't cut out for this kind of work. Maybe they'd be happier doing something simpler. You know, less responsibility. Less pressure. Maybe answering phones or filing paperwork. Something more their speed. Because let's be honest, not everyone has what it takes to succeed at this level. He raised his glass, smirking. A few people awkwardly clinked glasses with him. Most stayed silent, their eyes darting between Derek and me. I could feel the weight of their pity, their discomfort, their relief that it wasn't them up there being torn apart. Derek stepped away from the microphone, laughing with a few executives like he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. Someone changed the subject. The music started again. And, just like that, everyone moved on. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just been publicly destroyed. I left the party early. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I just grabbed my coat and walked out into the cold December air. My whole body was shaking. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, crying so hard I could barely breathe. I hated him. I hated myself for letting him do this to me. And I hated that no one in that room stood up for me. Not one person. They all just stood there and watched. Some of them even laughed. But as I sat there, wiping my tears, something inside me shifted. The humiliation turned into something else. Rage. Cold, focused rage. I wasn't going to take this anymore. Derek had crossed a line. He'd humiliated me in front of the entire company, in front of clients, in front of the CEO. And he was going to regret it. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up researching company policies, employment law, hostile work environment claims, documentation requirements. I pulled up every email Derek had ever sent me, every passive-aggressive comment, every unreasonable deadline, every instance where he'd changed requirements without notice and then blamed me for the confusion. I organized everything by date, created a detailed timeline, highlighted patterns of behavior, and started building my case. The next morning, I went to HR. I walked into Margaret's office, the head of human resources, and I filed a formal complaint. I detailed every incident of harassment, every belittling comment, every instance where Derek had sabotaged my work or publicly humiliated me. I provided printed emails, dated documents, recorded meeting notes. I even included testimonies from 2 other coworkers who had been quietly documenting Derek's behavior for months. Sarah from accounting and Miguel from IT. Turns out, I wasn't the only one he'd been tormenting. They'd been waiting for someone to make the first move. They were scared to come forward alone, but together, we had power. Margaret listened to everything. She took notes. She asked questions. And then she told me something that gave me hope. This wasn't the first complaint about Derek. There had been others over the years, but people had always dropped them or left the company before anything could be done. But this time was different. This time, there was documentation. This time, there were multiple witnesses. This time, HR couldn't ignore it. HR launched an internal investigation. Derek was put on temporary leave while they reviewed the evidence. When word got out, the office atmosphere changed overnight. People started talking. Whispers in the break room. Hushed conversations in the hallways. At first, I was nervous. I worried the company would side with him. He was a senior manager. He brought in big clients. He had relationships with executives. I was just a mid-level employee. Who would they choose? But then something unexpected happened. More people came forward. 5 other employees, past and current, filed complaints against Derek. Stories of verbal abuse, retaliation, stolen credit, and toxic management. One woman, Rebecca, had left the company 6 months earlier because of Derek. She'd been too afraid to speak up at the time, but when she heard about the investigation, she came back with her own documentation. She had emails where Derek had called her incompetent, told her she was lucky to have a job, threatened to fire her if she didn't work weekends without pay. Another guy, James, had been on medical leave for stress and anxiety directly caused by Derek's behavior. His doctor had documented it. The floodgates opened. Apparently, Derek had been pulling this for years, destroying people one by one, and everyone had been too scared to speak up. But once I stepped forward, others found the courage to do the same. The investigation took 2 weeks. During that time, the office felt different. Lighter. People talked more openly. They smiled. They collaborated without fear. It was like a dark cloud had lifted. I heard through the grapevine that Derek was panicking. He'd hired a lawyer. He was calling people, trying to get them to retract their statements, offering excuses, playing the victim. He claimed I was lying, that I had a grudge against him, that I was trying to sabotage his career. No one believed him. No one retracted their statements. 2 weeks later, Derek was fired. Not quietly. Not with a severance package and a polite exit. He was escorted out of the building by security, his personal items packed in a cardboard box. I wasn't there to see it, but my coworkers told me he looked furious. Humiliated. He argued with security, demanded to speak to the CEO, made a scene in the lobby. He yelled that this was unfair, that he'd given years to this company, that he was being targeted. Security didn't care. They walked him out the front door, and that was it. Derek Hathaway was gone. Exactly how he'd made me feel at that party. Powerless. Humiliated. Destroyed. But the story doesn't end there. A week after Derek was fired, I got a call from Linda, one of the executives who had been at the holiday party. She asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, though I wasn't sure what to expect. When we sat down, she looked uncomfortable. Guilty even. I owe you an apology, she said. I was there that night. I heard what Derek said to you. And I should have said something. I should have stopped him right there, walked up to that microphone and shut him down. I didn't, and I regret it. I let my own discomfort keep me silent, and that's not okay. You deserved better. We all failed you that night. I appreciated her honesty. It was more than anyone else had given me. Then she said something that shocked me. We've been reviewing your work. Your actual work, not Derek's version of it. And we're impressed. We had no idea how much you were carrying. Derek took credit for a lot of projects you handled. The client proposal that landed the Jennings account? That was you. The operational efficiency report that saved the company $200,000 last quarter? Also you. The vendor negotiation that cut supply costs by 15%? You. We went through the files. We saw the metadata, the original drafts, the emails. It was all you. Derek just put his name on it. A month later, I was promoted. Not to Derek's position, but to a newly created role, senior project lead, with a significant raise and my own team. I reported directly to Linda now, bypassing the entire toxic structure Derek had built. It felt surreal, like the universe had finally balanced the scales. I had my own office, my own budget, my own authority. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt respected. But the best part came 3 months later. I ran into Derek at a coffee shop downtown. He looked different. Tired. His suit wasn't as sharp. His confidence was gone. There were bags under his eyes. He was sitting alone, staring at his laptop with this defeated look on his face. He saw me and froze. His face went pale. For a moment, neither of us said anything. I could have walked past him. I could have ignored him. But I didn't. I stopped, looked him in the eye, and smiled. "Hey, Derek. How've you been?" He stammered something incoherent. His hands were shaking. I didn't wait for a real answer. I just nodded politely, grabbed my coffee, and walked out. That small moment, that tiny shift in power, felt better than any revenge I could have planned. I didn't need to say anything else. He knew. He knew that I'd won. He knew that his cruelty had destroyed his own career. And he had to live with that. Derek's firing sent shockwaves through the company. Upper management realized they had a culture problem. They'd been so focused on results, on hitting targets and closing deals, that they'd ignored the human cost. They brought in external consultants, revamped HR policies, and implemented mandatory management training focused on respect, communication, and accountability. They created clear channels for reporting misconduct. They even started an anonymous reporting system so employees could flag toxic behavior without fear of retaliation. Exit interviews became mandatory and were conducted by third parties to ensure honesty. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Real change was happening. As for me, I thrived. My new role gave me the autonomy I'd always wanted. I led projects I was passionate about. I mentored junior staff, making sure they never experienced what I went through. I built a team culture based on respect, collaboration, and trust, not fear. And every time I walked into a meeting, every time I presented to executives, I remembered that night at the holiday party. I remembered the humiliation. And I used it as fuel. I used it to push myself harder, to speak up louder, to never let anyone make me feel small again. People ask me sometimes if I regret filing that complaint. If I wish I'd just kept my head down and moved on. The answer is no. Not for a second. Because standing up to Derek didn't just change my life. It changed the lives of everyone else he'd been hurting. Sarah got promoted. Miguel transferred to a better department with a manager who valued him. Rebecca came back to the company in a different division and is thriving. James returned from medical leave and is doing great. We all won. It set a precedent. It showed people that toxic behavior has consequences. And it reminded me of something I'd forgotten along the way. I'm not someone who just takes it. I'm someone who fights back. I learned something important through all of this. Silence protects the abuser, not the victim. Every time I stayed quiet, every time I let Derek's comments slide, I gave him permission to continue. I told myself I was being professional, being mature, picking my battles. But really, I was just scared. Scared of losing my job. Scared of being labeled difficult. Scared of making things worse. And that fear kept me trapped in a cycle of abuse that nearly broke me. But when I finally spoke up, when I finally said enough is enough, everything changed. Not just for me, but for everyone around me. Because toxic people like Derek, they rely on silence. They rely on fear. They rely on isolation. They pick their targets carefully, people they think won't fight back. The moment you take that away, the moment you shine a light on their behavior, the moment you bring others together, they crumble. And that's exactly what happened. So if you're dealing with a Derek in your life, someone who makes you feel small, who humiliates you, who thrives on your suffering, hear me when I say this. Document everything. Every email, every conversation, every incident. Keep a journal with dates and details. Find your allies, because you're probably not alone. Build your case carefully and methodically. And when the moment is right, don't stay silent. Speak up. Go to HR. Go to a lawyer if you have to. Because the moment you do, you take back your power. And, trust me, watching them fall is worth every ounce of fear you had to push through to get there. Derek tried to reach out to me once after that coffee shop encounter. He sent me an email about 4 months after his firing. No subject line. Just a few sentences in the body. I'm sorry for how I treated you. I was under a lot of pressure and took it out on the wrong people. I hope you can forgive me someday. I stared at that email for a long time, debating whether to respond. Part of me wanted to tell him exactly what his behavior had cost me. The sleepless nights, the panic attacks, the therapy sessions, the damage to my confidence that took months to repair. But then I realized something. He didn't deserve my time. He didn't deserve closure. He didn't deserve forgiveness. So I deleted the email and moved on. That's the thing about people like Derek. They only apologize when they've lost everything. When there's nothing left to gain. When their reputation is destroyed and their career is in ruins. It's not genuine remorse. It's self-pity. It's a last-ditch attempt to feel better about themselves. And I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of my forgiveness. Some things are unforgivable. Some damage can't be undone. And some people don't deserve second chances. Today, I'm in a completely different place. I love my job. I respect my colleagues and they respect me. I'm working on projects that matter, making real contributions, and finally getting the recognition I deserve. And most importantly, I respect myself. I look back at that version of me, the one standing in that event space being publicly humiliated, and I barely recognize her. She was scared. She was broken. She felt powerless. But she was also brave. Because even in her darkest moment, she didn't give up. She fought back. And she won. If I could go back and talk to that version of myself, sitting in her car crying after the party, I'd tell her this. It gets better. The pain you're feeling right now, the humiliation, the anger, the fear, it won't last forever. You're stronger than you think. You're braver than you know. And you're about to do something that will change not just your life, but the lives of everyone around you. So hold on. Document everything. Find your people. And when the time comes, don't back down. Because you deserve better. And you're going to make sure everyone knows it. The night of that holiday party was the worst night of my professional life. But it was also the beginning of the best chapter. Because it forced me to make a choice. Stay silent and let Derek continue destroying me, or fight back and risk everything. I chose to fight. And it was the best decision I ever made. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and drop a comment below telling me about a time you stood up to someone who underestimated you. Have you ever dealt with a toxic boss or coworker? How did you handle it? I want to hear your stories. And don't forget to subscribe because I've got more stories coming your way. Real stories. Raw stories. Stories about standing up, fighting back, and winning. Thanks for listening.